Great news. Tom Hanks, one of the biggest stars in the world, is pushing back on extreme political correctness. He's had enough as well. But first, check out this shocking story. Australia's state broadcaster, ABC, the equivalent of the BBC, has been accused of vitriolic attacks on the King as part of its coronation coverage. The state-funded broadcaster was criticised after it aired a 45-minute discussion prior to the ceremony, which featured a panel dominated by pro-Republic figures who spoke about colonisation and the damage the monarchy had done to Australia. Thousands of viewers took to social media to express outrage at the inappropriate timing of the panel's discussion, and the Australian monarchist group are now threatening legal action against the ABC over its coverage of the event. Well, tonight's newsmaker live from Australia is The Spectator magazine's Alexandra Marshall. Hi, Alexandra.
Good morning, or good evening, as it may be the case for you.
Well, indeed, I think you're enjoying your cup of Morning Joe. And look, it's disappointing, this, isn't it? I mean, it's obviously very important to debate Britain's colonial past, but maybe not on Coronation Day.
Well, I'm actually an ambassador for Australians for Constitutional Monarchy, and we've been watching events closely. And it seems to me that the ABC only has one role, and that is to uphold whatever the Labor government wants. And so we've got two referendums. The first one is on the voice to Parliament, which is the enshrining of a racial bureaucracy into our Constitution. And then the next year, they've got planned for us another referendum on the monarchy. And so the ABC is completely paranoid about any positive monarchist views. And so they've had the death of Her Majesty the Queen, in which we saw Australia renew its love of history and its ancestry and the crown. And that followed on with the coronation, which is, of course, the ABC's worst nightmare. And the public were expecting, at the very least, a respectful coverage, even if they said nothing at all. But the ABC couldn't help themselves, and they brought on every person they could find who wants to be the next, basically, king, only a political version of that king. So, of course, they disappointed the public, and the few thousand people that still watch the ABC wrote in and complained, then switched channels.
Will it work? Do you think that this Labour government and the anti-royal ABC will see the King dispatched as the head of state of Australia? Will it happen?
Well, they're not doing themselves any favours, and I'll just put it in perspective for you, because Australia has had a couple of cultural events that have really annoyed the public. The first is they cancelled Anzac Day in favour of COVID restrictions, even though they let the Black Lives Matter march go ahead. Then they basically cancelled Australia Day, where they refused to put up any of our flags or any kind of notion that of nationhood. And then following straight on after that, we had the Gay Pride Week, in which the entire capital city was covered in glitter and rainbows. And so people were asking, well, why are there no Australian flags, but there are all these trans flags and LGBT flags? And then after that, we had the coronation, and our city of Sydney couldn't even be bothered to light the Opera House, which it does for every occasion. So the public were already restless about this contradiction between what the public want and what the government wants. And don't forget, Australia only recently said, yes, we'd like to keep our monarchy, unlike a lot of nations. And so we've got this complete misstep between what politicians want, which is more power, and what the public want, which is to keep the heritage in a world that's increasingly having it erased. And so if they lose the voice to Parliament referendum, which they very well might, considering the polls are going down, then they have Buckley's chance of winning the referendum on the King in the next year.
Now, long live the King in Australia. Can we talk about a rather vegan drama that's played out in Australia this week?
Oh, yes, the busybody eco-fascists. This is why they call them totalitarians. They're the people that get down the supermarket and stand in front of the milk when you really just want more coffee and you're out of milk, and they start throwing it over the floors because they don't like it. So these guys were sending annoying letters to their neighbour because their neighbour was having a barbecue, and there's nothing more Australian than having a barbecue, unless, of course, you're having a barbecue with kangaroo and emu, which tastes great, by the way. And so they were saying, oh, we don't like the smell, therefore can you please stop? And it's this invasive eco idea that's really starting to vex other people. It's fine if you want to be a vegan, that's no problem, go ahead. But when you start saying you can't be a carnivore, well, then people start getting frustrated. It's like the bike riders who want the entire city to drive at 4K an hour because some guys in Lycra want to go and wander around on a Saturday morning. It's those people. It's very irritating.
Well, that's right. This notorious letter that somebody, a vegan family, have said to a neighbour, can you stop cooking meat because it's upsetting us? The world's gone mad. However, briefly, Alexandra, good news from Hollywood. Tom Hanks has had enough of the woke crap.
Yes, well, this idea that you have to jump through all these hoops in order to win an award is the exact opposite of what the arts are. So they're basically saying if you want to win an Academy Award, you have to have this many people of colour, this many disabled people, this many people of a certain gender ideology. And it's a nonsense. How can you tell a story if you first have to fabricate your story within inside these special rules? It no longer becomes a story that the artist wants to tell, or that might be a real life story. It becomes some kind of political construction that's been filmed by Hollywood. And where's this going to end up? Are we going to have nobody able to play a role that they're not actually embodying as a person? So only gay people can play other gay people, only murderers can play murderers, only doctors can play doctors. It's nonsense. And some of the old school actors are finally realizing that maybe they won't have a career anymore unless they start pushing back.
Alexandra Marshall is a brilliant journalist. She writes for The Spectator. She can be found at Ellie Melly on Twitter. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your breakfast with us. We'll catch up soon. Alexandra Marshall there.